Please sit properly.
Lawmakers in the House of Representatives reconvene after a break for a closed-door meeting that lasted over 2 hours. The Speaker reads a letter from the President on his approval of $496 million for the purchase of Tucano attack aircraft from the United States of America.
In the expectation that the National Assembly would have no objection to the purchase of these highly specialized aircraft, which is critical to national security, granted anticipatory approval for the release of $496,374,470
This is only a singular
A point of order describing the action of the President as impeachable is immediately raised and receives strong support from other lawmakers.
A constitutional infraction as serious as expenditure without the National Assembly clearly runs foul of this Constitution and is an impeachable offense.
What is wrong is wrong. You cannot approbate and reprobate. If it is wrong for members of this parliament to have an input in the legislative process of spending money, then it is our legislative duties to do so. Other than that, I join my voice with my other colleagues here that have moved the motion for an impeachable offense, and I so second.
Then, the chairman of Rules and Business raises another point of order, which sparks a rowdy session.
A letter of this nature constitutes first reading. It is first reading. I mean, solid arguments from Honorable Chinda, but it's like putting the cart before the horse. The truth of the matter is that second reading will have the opportunity to strike this down.
Order, please.
The point of order draws reactions as the lawmakers are divided on whether or not to debate the matter right away.
He brought a letter here today that he will do $452 million Nigerian money without approval of Parliament, and somebody is quoting our order. Which order?
The best thing we should do now is that, having said whatever we have said, keep our gunpowder dry and be ready when this matter will be properly slated before us.
So we have a procedure. All we can do is to list it, and then all the issues we have raised can be raised, and then the House will come to a decision on this matter. So we'll select it for debate.
The lawmakers accuse the President of undermining the powers of Parliament and promise not to be partisan in defending the rights and privilege of the National Assembly. They describe the letter as an afterthought, as the expenditure had already been made. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Standing by with us is Group Captain Sadiq Shehu, a security consultant, and Mr. Kennedy Angbo, a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, as you've seen, we know that there's quite a bit of controversy stirring around this $496 million purchase of the 12 Super Tucano fighter jets. And Group Captain, as a former member of the Nigerian Air Force, let me start with you. What are your thoughts about the entire episode that we're watching play out?
Okay, thank you very much, Anjorin. Let me say, first of all, of course, I'm speaking on my personal capacity. I am not speaking on behalf of the Nigerian Air Force. My understanding of this uproar, there are two issues there. The purchase itself and its legality constitutionally. I am not a constitutional lawyer, but I can tell you briefly that purchasing the Tucano aircraft based on insurgencies all across the world, the Tucano aircraft is a very good buy for Nigeria, and it's a needed aircraft. Almost all countries that have encountered insurgencies, Afghanistan, Philippines, Colombia, have used this aircraft, which I can say is tested and trusted aircraft as far as counterinsurgency is concerned. When you are talking about military aircraft, there are different military aircraft for different purposes. But the world over, it is acknowledged that right now, the Tucano, based on its performance in combat, is the most suitable aircraft that any country that is facing insurgency would require. It is, yeah. Okay.
You know, but Group Captain, you know, when Nigerians just turn on the smartphone, Google, and put in Super Tucano, and what you'll see is that each unit is around $10 million. Getting 12 units at $10 million, that's what, $120 million, at least at the base price. We know that there are upgrades. We know that there are other issues involved. But do you think this government will be able to account for the difference between the $120 million that's quoted online and the 496 that has been released?
That's a very interesting question. Yes, when you Google or you find out from arms manufacturers, the cost of a unit of Tucano ranges from 9 to the upper limit 14 million a unit. Now, Nigeria is buying 12 for 496. If you do a simple arithmetic, it means we are buying ours about 40 billion or something like that. That's by my calculation. However, in my own opinion, it's an issue of communication. When you buy an aircraft, the unit that you see, 9 to 14 million, that is the unit cost of a base aircraft. What Nigeria is buying and what countries normally buy, depending on your technological base, you buy the aircraft together with training not only of pilots, training of engineers, training of communication experts. You buy spares. A country might decide that, okay, we have a poor technological base, so we want spares that will last us 5 or 10 years. As we have seen, the Air Force has been hindered by lack of capacity as far as spares are concerned. When I made inquiries at the American end, you find that not only the aircraft, it includes training, it includes infrastructure, it includes hangars, it includes many rounds of ammunition, it includes missiles, guns, and but at the Nigerian end, unfortunately, that communication did not come. So people who are dilettantes in military affairs, it is only fair they go and check. The unit cost is 9 million, and they're telling us to pay 40 million. Where is this? I think the government didn't do enough in terms of communicating what is it buying. But for me, given the whole package we have been privy to see, which the Americans are offering Nigeria, you could account for the difference between the 10 million that is being quoted as the unit price of the Tucano and what Nigeria is eventually given. And again, also, even the Tucanos, they are not the same. You have the Tucano Alpha and the Tucano Bravo. The Alpha is a single-seater aircraft which you use for attack, while the Bravo is a two-seater aircraft which you can use for training by carrying a student pilot. So between this mix of 12, definitely there are some that are single. So again, the price for each aircraft is not the same. Definitely the trainer will cost more than the single-seater aircraft.
Mr. Angbo, you've heard Captain Shehu's account. We now know that these jets are set to arrive Nigeria in 2020. That gives us approximately 2 years to be able to continue waging whatever campaigns we're going to wage in the absence of those aircrafts. What are your thoughts about the entire episode as well?
Well, I think it's not the purchase that is in question here. What's in question is the modus operandi, how they went about it. That's what is calling for the fury among Nigerians. It's the fact that, yes, there's a need for us to acquire these aircrafts. Obviously, I mean, like you mentioned, Ecuador, Chile, and the rest of countries who have experienced insurgency, they also have acquired this. But suffice to mention that this aircraft originally, it's a Brazilian aircraft that started operation in 1988, and then by the year 2000, 2001 and all that, then they started selling. So far, they have sold over 240 units. Now Nigeria is going to acquire 12 units of those aircrafts. With all the specifications, we don't have everything yet, but it also includes not only the 12 units, but there are also ammunitions and other things, trainings and all that, building capacity and the rest. But that's not what is in question. What's in question is, why would the president circumvent the process? First of all, remember that this process started under Obama's regime. But we were refused of these jets because of what happened in Iran. And there were grave concerns by the Congress of America that there are cases of abuse, which is why they refused to sell those aircraft to us. And so what did we do? We started negotiation. And it got to a point where by August 2nd, Congress had given approval for the sale of these aircraft to Nigeria. Now, between August last year, which predates the time of the current budget that is still under review, they didn't deem it fit to insert it in the budget, but left it out. Then they are now telling us that they were pressed for time, that the American government had given them a deadline, whereas it had been communicated to us ab initio from last year, August, that they were going to sell to us. And we didn't make provision for that in our budget. So it clearly states that there's a problem. Now, let me ask you a question. If you're the treasurer of an organization, let's say Channels Television, for example, and the company gives you 200,000 naira to keep. Now, you have a wife at home, you have children, and you haven't been given, you're anticipating your salary, and then you now dip your hand into the treasury of Channels Television. And you now say, I'm giving this one to my wife. When my salary comes, I will not pay. That is ultra-vires. That's violating the constitution of the country. So I'm in support of those who are calling for a constitutional process against the president, because you cannot do that. We are not running a personal, private affairs here.
The legality of the entire arrangement is clearly in question right now. But you mentioned something earlier on, which was that it was the RAN bombing that essentially offset. But we know that even before the RAN bombing, even before this administration, I think the attempt to purchase these two kind of fighter jets started under the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan, and then the U.S. government cited the Leahy Law for not selling us those jets as at that time. But I really want to clarify here. If the issue is about purchasing these jets, and there's this broad consensus amongst Nigerians that indeed we are under-equipped as a nation in terms of our defense capabilities, and that we do need to upgrade, then why is it that it appears that in the political circles of the country, there's not this consensus? There seems to be this notion on one side that we need to really upgrade our defense capabilities, and then on the other side, it's this money is going to be used to fund a presidential campaign. That's what the opposition has been publicly stating. So in view of these political dynamics and the controls within the legislature, etc., leaning in these directions, how do we get that consensus that would enable us to upgrade our defense capabilities?
The first thing is that politicians do not understand where the power really resides. It resides with the electorates. And they give the politicians in trust who wield it part-time. But what happens is that, forget about what the opposition is saying. The thrust is on the government to explain to Nigerians, because the point is, when people give you responsibility, they expect that you communicate with them so that they can have a buy-in into what you're doing. But there's clearly a disconnect, especially in terms of communication between the people who are in charge of our government and the people and the electorate. And which is why people are now making all kinds of assumptions. You don't leave the space for assumption. When you leave space for assumption, because it's the lowest level of knowledge, people begin to assume things that aren't. And so this is what the problem is, that the government ought to communicate properly. But if you remember, when the president had this meeting, he cancelled the FEC meeting and had a meeting with the security chiefs. The Minister of Defense came out, he said that the president had approved. Now, Ita Enan, the aide to the president on National Assembly matters, came out and said, no, it's not possible for the president to approve without getting the approval from the National Assembly. Then we now hear that the president had already made the payment, but now he's writing the letter after discovering that he's been misled or he had taken the wrong step. So what that clearly tells you is that, first of all, is that they do not understand how the workings of government is. You don't just spend money without appropriation. It is constitutionally illegal. And so that happens.